Today, I'm going to be presenting a new food pyramid. This is to help update those outdated paradigms, and this is not to rewrite any past. This is to say, look what was done, look at the conditioning we all grew up with, and see where your food beliefs might lie as we work on creating a system and a program that works for you as the individual. So say goodbye to outdated systems and hello to the system of you. And en route to creating the system of you, we're going to use education to empower you when making your food choices. We're going to look at the first ever food pyramid. This is a 1992 USDA food guide pyramid. And we can see at the bottom, slap a bang, breads and cereals, 6 to 11 servings of that, in fact. Coming up, we see vegetables, 3 to 5 servings, wonderful. Fruit, 2 to 4 servings, wonderful. Then they have a whole section for dairy. And you'll see with any new food pyramid or even plate guide that they'll have, they're not including dairy. Why? Because 70% of the world is lactose intolerant, and the dairy industry is an absolute powerhouse, a very, very successful, very, very rich powerhouse. And we have now since learned, thanks to modern nutrition science, that dairy is not an essential food group. And so it has been taken off. And then, of course, those lean meats, which they're not calling lean meats, they're calling meat, poultry, fish, dry beans, eggs, and nuts group. And then they go ahead and slap together fats, oils, and sweets and just tell us to use it sparingly. I'm going to tell you my 5 biggest issues with this. And these issues are obviously to educate you on the latest ways that we're kind of looking at nutritional sciences, but also to see where might those beliefs that I have around food have come from, and how am I going to rewrite that story based on your current belief system, based on your current research, and what is working well for your body. So, my first issue is they're overemphasizing the wrong kinds of carbohydrates. That food pyramid placed refined grains and carbs at the base, which is highly problematic because they also wanted us to have 6 to 11 servings. Can you imagine 6 to 11 servings of cereal per day? There is no good or bad food, but there is definitely understanding the different impacts of different foods on our brain and on our body, much like different thoughts have different impacts on our brain and on our body. So, this definitely led to diets high in processed breads, pastas, and cereals. Again, nothing wrong with any of those foods. It's just understanding that those are linked to blood sugar spikes, insulin resistance, and weight gain. We understand that weight fluctuates, especially as women, but that is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the obesity epidemic happening, especially in the USA and the UK. And it's knowing the difference between weight fluctuations, which we all experience, especially as women throughout the month, and being part of an obesity epidemic. Understand that carbohydrates are your energy, not your enemy. They are your vital food and fuel source. They are essential for helping you run, jump, skip, hug, dance all night with your friends, and they are not to be feared or avoided. No food groups are to be feared or avoided. They exist in varying amounts in all plant foods. Next, we definitely went through a fat-fearing phase. I don't know if you remember the rise of low-fat foods, but all fats were lumped together, as you see on this food pyramid at the top, as fats, oils, and sweets, told to use sparingly, which definitely led to the fat-fearing phase. This really helped to boost in the industrial era because, of course, we got to really make food so easy, quick, and efficient to consume because it was ultra processed. So they ignored the health benefits of all of the unsaturated fats, things like nuts and seeds and avos and olive oil, which of course are now hailed in the paleo and the keto groups. So this led to the rise in the low fat, high sugar products, which we now know sugar is definitely not something our body loves in excess. And this made all of those low fat foods more processed as a result. No one really stopped to ask, if you're taking out just that 1% fat, what else are you having to add in to have the same ability to keep things together? So that's emulsifiers, and the ability to still have things taste good. So that's the sugars or the sweeteners that we are now seeing are really not so good for our gut microbiome as a whole. So we are having a lot of unwanted ingredients being added to replace something like just 1% of fat, where really our body could have just done with the more natural source that 1 extra percent. And so fats are your brain's energy. That is what is going to fuel your brain's ability to think. And so, of course, in that low fat era, we definitely had very much a brain starved era, and maybe that accounts for some of the terrible decisions we made at that time. But nevertheless, we move on and we understand that fats too exist in all plant foods in varying amounts. Then I wanted to ask myself, where are the plant proteins on this group? They grouped all protein sources together. This includes processed meats, fish, poultry, and eggs. This was the era of lunch meats, of hams, and even meat inside of tins. They didn't really address the different impacts on health. For example, if you have really high cholesterol, that's going to impact the kinds of choices you make in terms of choosing proteins. So it really failed to promote plant based proteins, which are now recognized as being more heart healthy and anti inflammatory. We understand that proteins are the building blocks of our body, of every single cell, and they exist in varying amounts in all plant foods. So, as you can see, I am really trying to make a point here to show you that fats, carbs, and proteins all exist already packaged up perfectly for you in whole plant foods. And I thought I would just pop this in here to show you that there are many different sources to get plant proteins. Of course, you might still choose eggs to add into that, chicken, whatever your preferred protein is, but it's understanding that there are so many different sources of protein, and it is not just the bean and it is not just the piece of chicken, but that it exists in all plant foods. My next issue was that there was definitely not enough inclusivity and individuality. This pyramid was a one size fits all recommendation, and it was mostly based on Western diets and food industries. So it did not account for Eastern countries, plant based lifestyles, food intolerances, metabolic differences, or cultural variations in eating. So when we look at those longest living nations in the world, those blue zones, they're plant based, and they are certainly not Western. And my last issue is that they ignored the damages of ultra processed foods and did not look at modern nutrition science. The pyramid did not address the explosion of ultra processed foods, additives, and modern eating habits like constantly snacking or even skipping meals and fasting for long periods. So they really lacked guidance on things like mindful eating, understanding food quality, the rise in inflammation, and gut health, which don't worry, we'll be talking much more about all of this. But understanding that these are all now essential to holistic nutrition and they were just completely ignored. So, a calorie is not a calorie when fiber is involved. For example, nuts is always such a great example that when you look at a handful of nuts, the amount of calories is completely different than is, say, advertised on a packet because fiber is not taken into account. So, fiber is, of course, the thing that is not really able to be digested for your body, and it actually takes extra effort for your body to use something. So that is your thermic effect of food. Anyway, we will get to that at a different stage. So it's no wonder we're more confused than ever. But I want you to know that that confusion stops here because you are the expert on you. This is nutritional information that you can get absolutely anywhere, but it's time for you to become your own nutritional scientist. And most importantly, to learn to trust your body's innate wisdom, those hunger and fullness scales, and what your body's naturally craving. I'm going to take a look here at my version of a food pyramid. So, of course, understanding what your body might be craving or wanting starts by resetting that palate. It starts by taking you back and saying, okay, if my palate is being hijacked by all the ultra processed foods, what do I naturally crave when I don't have access to those things? So that is why I constantly go on those little dopamine detoxes because I love to have a little effective rewiring of tasting. Sweet corn is always the example that I use, how different it tastes without butter and sugar when I have a little break from constantly adding it to the food. And so, of course, here I have vegetables at the bottom, which I break up into other vegetables, greens, and cruciferous veggies. Then fruit, I also break up into berries and other fruits because I think berries are such a little superpower. I have beans, legumes, lentils, and soy, but you might include your other lean protein, like something like eggs, for example. And then I take it up to having whole grains, which is definitely the preference because it is in their most natural state. Natural is definitely a danger word in nutritional sciences, so we're just going to say in their most whole food state. And then we have nuts and seeds. I add flax seeds because I'm plant based myself and I'm also vegan, which means that I definitely need to be upping my omega 3. So I make sure to really focus on flax seeds and chia seeds for myself. And then, of course, we have herbs and spices, which is not really added, but can really add to that variety that we're going to be speaking a little bit more. So, why I personally choose whole food plant based is the longevity and disease prevention aspect of it was really interesting to me. This is really from the idea of, I think it was Dan, someone, that did all of this research on the blue zones. So people in blue zones, which are the regions with the highest life expectancy and also the highest health span. So health span being how long you stay healthy for versus lifespan, which is just how long you stay alive for, which if you've watched someone get old, you can definitely see the difference. And these people thrive mostly on plant foods like beans, greens, whole grains, and nuts. A whole food plant-based lifestyle is consistently linked to lower rates of heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, and cognitive decline. So understand that a whole food plant-based diet is definitely not vegan. Veganism is an ethical choice. It's in fact less of a diet and more of a lifestyle that just really focuses on prioritizing plants. It is, of course, better for the planet and does have a very different environmental impact. So it requires fewer natural resources, it produces significantly less greenhouse gas emissions, thank you, less cows, and helps reduce deforestation and water pollution. So this is shifting away from animal products, and it is definitely one of the most powerful acts we can take for climate resilience. This does not mean by any way that someone becomes vegan or only eats plants. That is not what we are advocating for as a movement. It just means that when you can make the choice, you choose more whole plant foods. Good for your body, good for the planet, good for the world overall. So it is also understanding that not everyone cares about everything. While animal welfare and climate change is something that I care about, you might be caring about something completely different. And that is perfect. Everyone has different passions. And so not everyone needs to jump onto every bandwagon. It is just having awareness around the impact of our choices. Of course, we are looking at gut health, which has exploded in the last 10 years. You're going to see the words fiber and variety so much. I swear I'm going to write a book on fiber and variety and the power that it has on our gut microbiome. Whole food plant foods are rich in prebiotic fiber and phytonutrients. So, of course, probiotics is the little gut guys themselves. Prebiotic is the food for those little gut microbiome guys. So these fuel a diverse and thriving gut microbiome. The more diverse, the better. And a varied plant diet promotes better digestion, reduces inflammation, as we said a few times here today, mental well-being, because your gut has impact on absolutely everything. 80% of your immune system exists in your gut. Your mood, what you crave, everything comes back to the gut. So more on gut health later. This is just to introduce the idea. And then, of course, it is naturally low in ultra processed foods. So I'm being very careful with my use there of the word natural, but just stick with me because it's really easy to become a junk food vegan or a junk food foodie in any way. So that's why I advocate for whole food plant based because this is inclusive to any religion, diet choice, or culture. You can be a whole food plant based paleo person because it is not one type of diet. It's just advocating for as much as you can whole plant foods. So it avoids refined, packaged, and additive laden foods. It means fewer blood sugar spikes, a reduced risk of obesity and metabolic syndrome, which is on with fewer preservatives, colorants, and hidden sugars that definitely do hijack your hunger. They hijack your taste buds, and of course, they're hijacking your health. And lastly, I'm really showing you how to promote that natural satiety, energy, and food freedom. Because eating whole, unrefined plants allows for larger, more satisfying meals. These meals are nutrient dense, but they're also calorie conscious. And while I don't advocate for counting calories, I do advocate for choosing quality calories. So, this, of course, leads to more sustainable energy, fewer cravings, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do this with a plate method, improve mental clarity, and a more peaceful, hopefully intuitive relationship with food, as we'll see as time goes on. So I always give the example of overeating something, I said overeating, overeating something like potatoes. It is so hard to overeat potatoes because potatoes are the highest thing on the satiety scale. It's incredibly hard to overeat something like beans or even pineapple because it literally feels like it's actually eating me back. And it is impossible to overeat those things, right? Because, of course, it is nature and it is our body. And when we eat things that are from the ground, that are meant to heal us and not harm us, then you are going to watch how your body just thrives with its ability to start to listen more intuitively to those hunger and fullness scales. So keep an open mind and heart because soon it'll be time to rewrite your food story. I'll see you then.